The weather is getting quite a bit chilly now, so it's time to adapt. There we go. Much better. I know it's been quite a while since you have seen the teaser of this thing, but the truth is I had a lot of stuff to do. I still have a lot of things to do at the farm, so I don't have much time right now. But I figured it'd be a good occasion today to showcase what I have right here in front of me. So the base snowmobile behind all of this was initially an Art Attack snowmobile. What I've done to it since then is that I've replaced a bunch of stuff to make it a little bit better, and I've also replaced the hood and the seat. They're now from the Skidoo ZX. It was a big 1/5 scale toy that was made a couple of years back. They're now really hard to find, but I have this chassis now and I decided to install it here. I think it's a much better option to put that body over that chassis rather than trying to fit all the Art Attack stuff inside of the platform of this toy. I was actually surprised on how well it fit together, but it just, you know, lined up pretty well. I had to extend the tunnel a little bit. It's about 4 or 5 inches longer than initially. I wanted to go for a 151 inches tunnel just because in 2002, 2003 it was the longest skid track available. I know around that time there was also a 159, which was the longest for a couple of years. They only made it for I think a year or two, and then they discontinued for a number of years, and then they changed it back to I think a 154 many years later. But anyways, for the most part, a 151 in the 2000 years was the longest skid available. So I figured I would go for a 151. The track for this is the chevron type. The goal is that the snow that's at the center of the skid, if you try to maintain the snow in the center of the skid, hopefully it doesn't trench quite as much and it just keeps going forward. But I'm not sure if that's actually going to improve the performance, but if it doesn't, the option is to flip the chevron around. It's not just flipping the track, it's just flipping the paddles the other way. Instead of taking the snow and bringing it all to the center to avoid trenching, if I flip it around and it pushes against the side, maybe it will have a wider path, so maybe it will have more push. I don't know. I have to test it out in deep snow. I haven't had a chance to do it yet. We don't have any snow now, which is kind of a shame, but you can't have snow all the time that's, you know, good snow. So the skid for this and also the skis, they're the same ski and skid and track as these machines. The only difference is that since I had more space in the tunnel, I made a slightly wider track. So this is the equivalent of, I don't know, a 20-inch track or 21, 22-inch track for scale. It should have quite a bit of flotation, and also since this snowmobile, like the Art Attack behind it, had a wide front end, it should have quite a bit of stability, especially at high speed. What else can I talk about? It is not complete yet. I still have a few things I want to do on it. I especially want to add a front bumper because now this is kind of empty. I would like to have a front bumper. There's also quite some gaps here. I would like to maybe put a mesh or a frag skin over it to prevent too much snow from going in. It's good for ventilation, it keeps the engine bay cool, but I mean they're pretty big gaps, so I would like to fill them up a little bit. I also had to take the headlights off because of the engine inside. It's such a tall engine, it would interfere with the lights, and instead of trying to modify it all, I just said let's just take them off completely, and it will add some ventilation and keep the engine bay cool as well. So that's most of it for the aesthetics. Now what about the mechanical side and the features it has? So I want to go old school with this, so that means most of the parts and stuff, like the only sort of modern things in this are the 3D printed parts and some of the electronics inside, but you will see in a second, most of the internals I went old school, like at least 20 years back, because that's the spirit of the snowmobile. That's what I wanted to go with this. I like the look of the scale sled too. So no longer antennas, and it has of course a 2.4 gigahertz system. It's just one less thing to worry about. So let's go inside. It has the bungee cord, sort of like the real deal. So you just take the bungee cords off, and then it has a hinge. And then it also has a sort of a rope to hold the hood in place so it doesn't flop open too much. Let's start with the engine. let's put it like this. So the engine is a 0.21 engine. It's the stock engine that came with the Snowmobile. I don't know if that's a factory engine from Art Attack or if it's a engine that the guy that had the Snowmobile before me installed. But either way, this is a 0.21, no name one. The exhaust, this exhaust is a Traxxas muffler and some copper piping, half-inch copper piping to do the bands for the exhaust. I had to use that exhaust because I really didn't like the look of the exhaust that came through the side. I think it just took too much from the look of the Snowmobile. So I had to remake the exhaust. I know I lost a little bit of length to the exhaust, so that means I am losing in the low end torque of the engine. But having a shorter expansion pipe allows me to gain in the top end. I don't think that's where it should be, but due to size constraint, it's better to have this than having a straight pipe. So it still has a good amount of power, and I'm not too worried it's gonna perform well in the snow. If you want to do an exhaust like this, you cannot use simple tin as a soldering agent. Like you can't use this. The reason for it is because that melts at a temperature that the exhaust gases can get to. So if you do plan on making your own exhaust, I would advise that you get some copper welding rods and you melt it all together, and then once it's all done, then maybe add a bit of this to seal all the holes, but it should not be your primary holding agent. One of the downsides that Snowmobile had from factory is the fact that it had no brakes. So you would go forward at a certain speed, you have no brakes. Normally the track that came with it was very stiff, so it's part of the structure of the Snowmobile was to brake from factory with that track. Since I replaced it with a track that's really easy to spin, I can spin it with one finger no problem. That made it that if I was going fast and I just let off the gas, it would still cruise very fast. And in most situations, it's best to have a brake in some emergency situations. So what I've done is that I've modified the linkage for the throttle servo to implement a braking system. It's just a leather strip, rubs against the clutch when I apply the brakes. So when you give it gas, you push that lever and it opens the carburetor, and when you flip it the other way, it pulls on the lanyard against the clutch and it brakes the Snowmobile. I know this is not the best solution because the clutch is extremely hot, and you know, it's the leather is organic material, so it might smell, or you know. But if it doesn't work, I'll just take it off and think of something else. But so far it works really well on the bench. If I pull on the lanyard, it breaks quite a bit. So the solution works. It's just how long is it gonna last? Is it a bad design? I don't know. We will see. Also from factory, the engine didn't have a air filter, so I had an air filter around that came from a Traxxas vehicle. Put it on and it works very well. I wanted to keep it simple and easy, so I remained with pull start system. It's still from stock, so I can just put my glow plug igniter, pull the pull start a couple of times, and boom, the engine is running. All right, so now fuel tank. I had to modify the fuel tank, so here's what I used. I've used one of these Sullivan's fuel tank. This is a round one, but in the Snowmobile it's a square or rectangular one. I love these tanks. It comes with everything you need. Piping, the caps, the weight. It comes with everything in the bag, and it's very cheap. So I love using these tanks for all my projects. The only thing is that I had to tilt the fuel tank slightly to the back so that my plunger or the weight would pick up the fuel at the bottom. Even if I go forward, give it gas, or if I brake, it wouldn't starve the engine and stall. You know what? Let me take the seat off and we'll see it properly. So there's 4 screws holding it up, and when you take it off, you have the switch here for the plug, so turn everything on. So I'll need a closer camera for it all, I think. Or I can try to do just this. Alright, so here we have my Sullivan tank. It has been slanted from stock because this is the riding height. It might be a bit low on the front, but you can see that the fuel, normally if I would lay it down against the tunnel, it would slant forward and you would starve the engine very easily. So I had to make a little ramp to slant it backward. Here we have a stack of batteries. This is to power the entire system. I didn't want to use a LiPo. The reason for it is because this is an old school project, and it also allows me to do something very special. I can just stack my batteries. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 batteries. That's 10.5 volts for the battery pack. And that 10 volts is too much for the receiver and the electronics. So what I did is that right here you have a Castle CCBEC. It takes the 10 volts for the battery and converts it to roughly 6 volts for the electronics inside. I also have right here an old school capacitor that came from a milking machine because I had one laying around. It is a 4700 microfarad, so that's more than good enough to make everything level in terms of power delivery. So all of this is delivered to, let me flip this around. It's all delivered right here to this receiver. This is a Futaba 4PM system, so this is a 2.4 system. It's very compact, doesn't take a lot of space. In between the battery and the BEC, you have a plug here for the switch, of course. Then it gets to the BEC, gets to the receiver, and then it's getting to the steering servo and the throttle servo here in the front, and that's how everything is powered up. Also, to avoid having heat issues against the wire, there's a little aluminum part here to cover the wires so it doesn't burn them. Some other modifications that might be worth talking about is the fact that I have replaced the flywheel on the Snowmobile because I had a normal size flywheel. So here is a normal size flywheel. It's about 1.5 inches in diameter. It's a silver thing right here. So you can compare it. It's almost 2 times as big. It's quite a bit more torquey and it doesn't want to stall quite as easily, which is really good, especially when in the winter time you have to tune your engine quite often to accommodate for the temperatures. That means that I can start my engine, let it idle for a bit, then make my changes, and if it wants to stall, sometimes I have a bit more time to recover by modulating my throttle. I mean, sure, it does add some weight, but I prefer to have the ease of mind that I can sometimes recover just by the large inertia of the engine. I also kept the original belt system. I think it works all right. Gears would probably be a bit more efficient and less frictiony, but it works all right, and a .21 has more than enough power to turn the entire system now with the new track. I also had to modify slightly my tie rod system for the skis because I had to modify some parts around here, so I just made my own with thicker aluminum wires and made some bends into it. If you want to start the entire Snowmobile, it's quite simple. I'm gonna leave the seat off to the side, but I still need the switch to power it on. So let me plug this. This is my transmitter. It's still brand new, a bit of dust on it, but it's a Futaba 4PM. It's a great radio. It's a bit on the expensive side, but Futaba is a premium company, so you pay for that. So this is on. I can flip the switch on. It'll power from the battery, it gets to the BEC, to the capacitor, to the receiver, and now everything's responding. Now if I want to start the engine, I would just put the glow plug igniter into it, yank a couple times, start the engine, simple as that. And if I want to shut the engine, you have this clip here just before the filter. You just clip this and it will cut the fuel going to the carburetor and it will stall the engine. So just like that, that's how you take everything apart and that's how you reassemble it. It's pretty simple. Like the main goal of it all was just let's make it simple and enjoyable, nothing to worry about. It's literally if the engine has the fuel and it's tuned properly, it will run. Almost nothing can fail. Even the batteries, you won't have to worry about a low battery because before you take the batteries, the AA batteries, before you take them from 10.5 volt to 6 volts so that the BEC cannot drop the voltage or maintain it at 6 volts. Before that happens, I'm expecting to be able to do the entire winter season with that, so I don't have to worry about is my lithium battery recharged or is it ready to run. If there's fuel in the tank and you know what you're doing in terms of tuning, it will go. I know I like to push my design a lot and just crazy ideas, but this time around the goal was just make it simple, make it work, let's have some fun and let's go vintage, because you know it's part of the challenge, it's part of the fun. That's what I wanted. So I hope you see this video and tell yourself, okay, there's something I can do myself for the Nitro challenge. If you participate, the more people participate, the more fun the challenge is. And you see all sorts of things that people do. Sometimes it could give you some ideas. I've seen a few designs already from people that have, you know, attempted the challenge so far, and I think it looks awesome. Like some ideas out there are really great. So like I said, if you want to participate in the challenge, you have until January 1st, it's the deadline. We're gonna then take a couple of days to look it all up and then make a video on what you guys have put together. If you want to make your video easy to find for us, just make hashtag bring back the Nitro. You will find the videos. I think it's just a simple thing. You can just add it in the video's description, just hashtag bring back the Nitro, and there you go. You will see all these videos if you Google that keyword. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for riding with me.
So I'd like to know exactly what happened, but from what I can see, the wheel, the axle came from the edge. This was just a zip tie holding it in place, so I'm not too surprised. So it came off, the wheel came off, the track came off, and it did exactly what you can see.